The more you try to force reality to change, the more it resists. There is an invisible tension that grows every time you wake up expecting that today everything will change. But by the end of the day, the same feeling of blockage remains. It's as if the more you insist, the further the result drifts away. Have you noticed that? The silent struggle, which mixes hope, despair, and a constant anxiety, comes with an emotional cost that few people talk about. The exhaustion of someone who feels like they're always pushing life, and it simply won't move. And the worst part is that, over time, the mind begins to create justifications. You convince yourself that maybe something is missing. A new method, a new technique, more affirmations, more visualizations, more effort. But deep down, a question begins to echo. Why, even after doing everything they say works, does nothing really change? The answer to this is something most people were never invited to see. There is a turning point, an exact moment where the real shift begins, and it doesn't happen when you try harder or when you dedicate yourself more. The shift starts the second you stop forcing and start observing, not from a place of giving up, but from a presence so deep that the field can finally breathe with you. Today, what you'll feel here is not another technique to make reality obey, but an invitation to understand why the universe only moves when you stop trying to push it. There's something almost no one notices while stuck in the constant effort for change. The quantum field, the invisible structure that sustains our reality, doesn't respond to what you say you want, but to the internal state you emit while desiring it. This is one of the most uncomfortable, and at the same time, most liberating truths when finally understood. While you insist, struggle, visualize desperately, or repeat affirmations trying to convince yourself that you believe, the field is picking up only one dominant frequency: resistance. And what is resistance at the vibrational level? It's the reflection of an internal gap between what you want to feel and what you're actually feeling while you want it. It's not your conscious intention that determines reality's movement, but the emotional tone that accompanies that intention. Imagine the universe as a quantum mirror. It doesn't observe your request with judgment. It doesn't assess whether you deserve or don't deserve what you're asking for. It simply reflects who you are being in the now. If, while desiring something, you feel anguish, haste, fear of losing it, or anxiety that it will never come, that's exactly the vibration the field reads, interprets, and returns. Not as punishment, but as an exact response to what you're emitting. The problem is that most of us were taught to pursue things through force, continuous effort, the logic of insistence, as if reality were a locked door that would only open with the accumulated weight of our attempts. But in the subtle field of frequencies, the more you try to force it, the more the door seems to reinforce the block. There's a kind of energetic paradox in all of this. You want a new reality because you feel the current one no longer serves you. That's legitimate. But the fear of staying trapped in what is makes you connect precisely with the energy of stagnation. The anxiety that time is passing without change anchors you in the psychological time of waiting. And the field understands that as, okay, so what we're vibrating is scarcity, urgency, lack. Let's keep more of that. Resistance is like a dense electromagnetic field generated by the combination of emotional tension and repetitive thoughts of lack. No matter how much you try to mask it with forced positivity or superficial visualizations, the field perceives what's behind it, the fear that nothing will happen. And until that emotional base is realigned, the universe will continue reflecting exactly what you're vibrating, not what you're affirming. There's also a very common illusion on this journey, the idea that wanting harder will speed up the process, that if you visualize more often, feel more intensity, or create more expectations, the universe will finally give in. But the field isn't moved by the quantity of effort, but by the quality of presence. It's not how much you want, it's where you're wanting from. Perhaps without realizing, you've entered a cycle where the very act of desiring has become a daily exercise in resistance. Every visualization has become an attempt to control. Every affirmation, an attempt to force the field to move. But reality doesn't transform by imposition. It bends only before an internal state of surrender and alignment, when wanting is carried with lightness and not urgency. And here's a key few people really access. The field reads vibrational coherence. When what you feel, think, and do are in tune, the universe responds. When there's dissonance, it simply keeps echoing what's dominant. That's why what you feel while desiring matters infinitely more than the content of the desire itself. This understanding may feel uncomfortable at first. After all, it dismantles the idea that just wanting hard enough makes things happen. But at the same time, it opens a new door. A door where power is no longer in forcing, but in learning to adjust your frequency with awareness. There's an almost invisible cycle that many people live in, without realizing they're in it. It's the cycle of force and frustration. It starts subtly. First comes the sincere desire for change. You feel like you can't stand living the same situations anymore, the same blocks, the same responses from life. So with all the energy you have, you start acting. You make lists of goals, create routines, repeat affirmations, visualize, throw yourself body and mind into the process. At first, there's hope vibrating strongly. It seems like now it will happen, that this time, life will yield. But the days go by, and things don't move as you imagined. Small delays, confusing signals, situations that seem to repeat the same old scenarios. And that's when anxiety begins to grow. That feeling arises that maybe you need to do more. Try harder. Insist with more force. It's at this moment that the silent cycle of force settles in, and what was supposed to be a conscious creation movement turns into an internal struggle against reality itself. With each new attempt, your body feels more tense, your mind more accelerated. Sleep is no longer the same. Emotions begin to oscillate between hope and despair. You wake up already thinking about how to change what's outside, and you go to sleep frustrated, feeling like nothing happened. What you may not have realized yet is that this continuous tension is creating an even bigger field of resistance. The more you try to control the results, the more reality responds with stagnation. The more you force, the more the field remains rigid. The truth is, there's a huge difference between acting with awareness and reacting with despair. And when the impulse to act comes from the fear that nothing will happen, what you're really feeding is the frequency of fear. The problem is that the force cycle is addictive. It gives the false sensation that at least you're doing something, that you're not standing still, that you're moving. But this movement, most of the time, is just a reflection of anxiety. It's not a quantum movement. It's an emotional survival movement. And the frustration that comes afterward is even denser, because it carries not only the weight of waiting, but also the guilt of feeling that, despite all the effort, you're still in the same place. The mind starts creating internal stories. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe the universe doesn't look at me. Am I doing something wrong? These questions feed even more the vibration of doubt and scarcity. And it's at this point that many people give up or enter even more toxic cycles of self-sabotage. They start looking for faster and faster solutions, more immediate ones, hoping that a new method, a new technique, a new promise will bring the result they so expect. But the root of the block remains untouched. It's necessary to look very honestly at this pattern. Recognize that behind the excess of effort, there's a deep resistance to life's flow. There's a fear of letting go of control, a fear that if you stop forcing, nothing will happen. But what keeps reality stuck is not the absence of action, but the quality of the energy with which you've been acting. When you try to hold sand in your hands, the tighter you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers. Life works the same way. It's not about giving up, but recognizing that there is a different way to move through reality, a way to act without carrying the tension of need, a way to desire without diving into despair. There is an almost imperceptible moment where everything begins to change, It's not when you give up on what you want, and it's also not when you decide to fight harder. This moment happens when, for the first time, you feel your body letting go, your mind becoming silent, and a deep surrender settles within you. This is the state of vibrational surrender. For a long time, you may have confused surrender with giving up, as if letting go meant giving up on your dreams. But what happens in true surrender is exactly the opposite. It's not about abandoning what you desire, but about releasing the need to control how and when things will happen. Vibrational surrender is a state where your internal field reorganizes itself. The tension that was previously blocking the flow begins to dissolve. The layers of resistance created over years of fear, anxiety, and attempts at control begin to give way. And in that space, something new can finally emerge. The quantum field, the invisible structure that connects all possibilities, can only respond with lightness when you become light. When you stop emitting signals of urgency, demand, and fear, and start vibrating a silent trust, a presence that says, I'm already in motion, even if my eyes can't see it yet. The great key to surrender lies in learning to trust the invisible, to realize that the field works in silence, that reality is always responding. Even when you think everything is standing still, anxiety wants immediate proof. It wants quick results. But elevated consciousness understands that true manifestation is first born inside and only later takes shape in the external world. This process isn't rational. There's no checklist to know if you're truly surrendered, but your body and your vibration will show you. Your breathing becomes deeper, your chest less compressed, your emotions begin to stabilize, and most importantly, that obsessive thought of when will it happen begins to lose strength. Surrender doesn't mean passivity, it means active presence. A state where you act, but act from a real connection with the present moment, where each of your movements comes from inspiration and not from the need to fix reality. It's an internal space where you begin to notice the small signs the field sends. A conversation that brings a new perspective, a synchronicity that seems like mere coincidence, but touches something deep within you, an intuition that arises from nowhere, but makes total sense. When you are in this state, life begins to conspire in ways that previously seemed impossible. Doors that were once locked begin to open. The right people show up. Situations organize themselves, not because you forced it, but because you allowed it. And it's in that moment that you realize reality was never against you. It was just waiting for you to stop fighting against it. Now, if this makes sense to you, if somewhere inside you, this truth has already begun to echo, I want to invite you. Like this video so that more people can access this state of surrender. And if you feel it's your moment to stop forcing and start allowing, write in the comments, I choose to let go and trust. Because when you consciously make that choice, the field begins to respond. There is an exact point, an almost invisible moment, where the shift begins. It's not a grand moment, full of external signs or with some immediate confirmation that the mind can perceive. In fact, almost always, it happens in silence. While you are breathing, perhaps even tired from trying so much, an internal change arises that can only be felt, not explained. It's the moment when your body lets go, when breathing deepens naturally, where the previously accelerated and repetitive thoughts begin to lose intensity. A lightness sets in. Not because everything around you changed, but because something inside you finally gave way. What really happens at this moment is a release of vibrational tension. Until then, you were operating in a state of energetic contraction. Your field was rigid, like a rope stretched to the limit, holding the weight of expectation, demand, and anxiety. And suddenly, that rope loosens. When that happens, the quantum field notices, because the field reads your vibrational state, not your words. It's not what you say you want. It's who you are being in that moment. And when your state changes, the field begins to reorganize the probabilities around you. This reorganization doesn't follow the linear logic that the mind knows. It's not immediate in physical time, but it is immediate in vibrational time. The very second you let go, your frequency begins to emit a different signal, and this signal begins to create new routes of manifestation. Sometimes, the first signs are subtle, a sense of relief with no apparent reason, an internal silence that once seemed impossible. Other times, it's as if, out of nowhere, things begin to flow in unexpected ways. A message arrives, an opportunity appears, a conversation brings the answer you've been seeking for months. But the most important thing is to understand that the shift is not an external result. It's an internal state change that inevitably begins to generate responses in the world around you. The field responds to your surrender with movement, not because you convinced it to change, but because you stopped blocking the flow. What seemed stagnant begins to yield. The connections that were stuck begin to open, and most importantly, you begin to feel that you no longer need to fight to live. There's a peace that arises not because everything is resolved, but because you no longer need resolution to feel safe. This moment is deeply transformative because it marks the end of a cycle of resistance and the beginning of a new phase, that of conscious co-creation. From here on, your relationship with reality changes. You stop reacting with fear and start responding with presence. And even if the mind tries at times to return to the old patterns of doubt, now you already know the way back. Because once you feel what it's like to be in a state of vibrational surrender, the body remembers. The soul knows. This is the turning point, the moment when everything begins to move. After the shift happens, after you finally feel your body let go and the field starts to respond, a new stage arises. And perhaps this is one of the most challenging, sustaining this state of surrender without falling back into the cycle of anxiety and rush. It's natural for the mind to try to pull you back into control. It's been trained for that for years. There's an almost automatic impulse to start monitoring the results, to want to constantly check if the universe is really moving. You wake up feeling good, but in the middle of the day, you start wondering if something has already changed. And it's at that moment that the frequency begins to fluctuate. The mind likes certainty. It wants quick proof. It wants to know exactly when, how, and in what way reality will transform. But the quantum field doesn't respond to that kind of energy. It doesn't recognize urgency as a signal of readiness. On the contrary, anxiety is a vibrational code that the field reads as insecurity, and the movement that had just started can simply slow down. That's why sustaining the state of surrender is a daily exercise in presence. It doesn't mean you'll never feel doubt or impatience again. It means that when those feelings arise, you'll recognize the pattern and choose not to feed it. You'll observe, breathe, and realign. Conscious breathing is one of the simplest and most powerful tools in this process. Every time you notice anxiety coming back, stop for a few minutes. Feel the air going in and out. Bring your focus to the now, because the now always has fewer problems than the mind makes it seem. Another essential point is observation without judgment. Don't blame yourself for feeling fear or for having emotional setbacks. The process of expanding consciousness is like this, a flow. Sometimes you'll feel in a high frequency. At other times, it will seem like everything went back to the beginning. But even on those days, the field keeps responding, because what matters is not emotional perfection, but vibrational consistency over time. Trust needs to stop being just an idea and start becoming a physical sensation, something your body recognizes. And this only happens when you practice being in the now, without trying to predict the future. True surrender is only sustained when you can find safety, even within uncertainty. This is where internal silence starts working in your favor. The moments of pause, of contemplation, of simple presence, are like energetic anchors. They stabilize your field. And the more you allow yourself to be in this state, the more the universe understands that you are ready to receive the new without forcing. Another important aspect is creating small presence rituals throughout the day. Not as an obligation, but as a way to remind your body that it is safe. A conscious walk, a moment of deep breathing, even just looking out the window, can be enough to realign your frequency. The key here is not to do more, but to do differently. Instead of looking for new control strategies, you start cultivating an internal state of openness, a space where life can come in without the need to be pushed. And perhaps the most challenging, but also the most transformative, is learning to trust, even when the external world still seems the same, because it's in this interval, between what you feel and what hasn't happened yet, that true alignment strengthens. The field works in silence, but the answer always comes, sometimes in ways you could never have imagined, other times in such subtle ways that only with a more attentive look you'll realize it's already happening. The important thing is to sustain the state, breathe, feel, and choose at every moment to remain in the frequency of someone who knows that the universe is already in motion. In the days following the shift, something starts to change, not explosively or with major events, but with subtleties that only those who are attentive can notice. It's as if reality begins to give small signs, discreet, almost shy, that the field has really started to yield. The first symptom is internal, a lightness that previously seemed impossible. That weight on your chest, that accompanied every thought about the future, starts to lessen. You notice that anxiety, that constant presence that was part of your emotional routine, no longer has the same strength. Not that it disappears overnight, but now, there's a space between the stimulus and the reaction, a conscious pause that didn't exist before. You start noticing synchronicities, small encounters, phrases that seem like answers to questions you didn't even verbalize. A song that plays at the exact moment you were immersed in a specific thought, an unexpected phone call, an email arrives with an opportunity that, until days ago, seemed distant. These external movements are direct reflections of the change that happened inside you. Because when your frequency changes, the field reorganizes the flow around you. People start looking at you differently. Situations that were stuck begin to unfold with less resistance. It's as if the universe starts to open gaps, where before there were only closed doors. And it's not just about concrete events. There's a noticeable change in your relationship with time. The rush gives way to a more stable presence. You stop looking at the clock with that constant urgency and start realizing that, interestingly, things arrive when you least expect them. Thoughts also change in texture. Before, your internal dialogue was full of demands, doubts, and questions about what else you needed to do to unlock life. Now, there's a kind of mental silence that you may never have felt before. It's not that the thoughts disappear, but they stop controlling your emotions. It's as if you're observing, instead of identifying with every thought that arises. Another common sign is the change in your physical disposition. Your body starts responding differently. Sleep becomes more restorative. Breathing deeper. Even the way you move gains a fluidity that previously seemed distant. And perhaps the most surprising is realizing that your need to control the future has diminished. You start trusting on a level that isn't rational, not because everything has already happened, but because, for the first time, you feel that you no longer need to prove anything to life. There's a silent certainty that the path is unfolding, even if still invisible to the eyes. This is the beginning of conscious manifestation, not in the sense of attracting things with mental effort, but of allowing the field to bring what was already ready, just waiting for the right moment to emerge. And if you observe carefully, you'll notice that even the challenges that appear arrive differently. There's less reactivity, more clarity, more capacity to respond instead of reacting. This set of signs is the confirmation that reality is beginning to yield, that the universe has picked up your new vibrational state, and now it's just organizing the flow so that the answers arrive. We've reached the end of our journey, and perhaps you're already feeling that something inside you is no longer the same, because when consciousness expands, it's impossible to look at life with the same eyes as before. Today, you understood that what was blocking your reality wasn't the lack of effort, but the excess of it. You realized that the field doesn't respond to your anxiety, but to your frequency, and that the true shift begins the moment you choose to let go and trust. Now, your only task is to sustain this state. Observe, allow, and let the field work. If you've made it this far and feel that this video brought a turning point, write in the comments, "I am ready to live in flow." That way, I'll know you stayed until the end, and that somehow, this message found its right moment for you.